Welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. My name is Amri Johnson, your host. Season 3 of the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast will be focused on opening up dialogue about a way forward in the diversity and inclusion space that's focused more on who we are than what we ascribe to one another. It will be about shifting patterns and practices we've come to adhere to in the space, examining them with fresh eyes in the current climate, about principles the work has revolved around and why and what principles we might need to consider anew, about exploring our thinking, how we are making meaning of our workplaces and the world around us in the most curious ways we can, how we listen with skill, openly learn, create the conditions that allow colleagues to know they matter. Welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. My name is Amri. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Gamiel Yafai. Gamiel and I have been, I think, passing each other in the night, so to speak, for many years, and I've been here in Europe. And then it was last year, I'm at a conference doing a talk, and we see each other, and it was almost like, okay, am I in front of my LinkedIn? Like, what's going on here? This is really Gamiel Yafai in the flesh. Gamiel, welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast.
Amri, phenomenal to actually spend some time with you. And I feel really privileged today because for me, this is a conversation. So unfortunately, you're asking the questions.
Well, it doesn't always have to be like that. We'll get there soon where we can just have a dialogue. So I'm looking forward to that as well. I'm going to ask Gamiel to introduce himself in a second, but across the globe, there's a few people who I consider standard bearers in the space that have been doing this long enough that they've seen the cycles, they've seen the ups and downs, they've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Gamiel is one of those people. And so what you're in for is a treat of somebody who is probably one of the most kind and wise people that have graced the space that we know as EDI, DEI, inclusion, diversity. He's been through every single name that we've had in the past few decades. And I'm looking forward to jumping in. So Gamiel, what we do at the beginning of every Reconstructing Inclusion podcast episode is we ask people a couple questions. The first one is a book, film, or song that you go to over and over again?
Well, the first one, the book is To Kill a Mockingbird. And growing up as a kid, it was, it really highlighted, and again, this film goes back, I can't remember when it came out, but it was the 70s. And it really highlighted the injustice, that people experience, but also how others gang up and literally join the clique. And that was really interesting. In terms of films, I could name 100. One of my passions and loves is history. However, I cannot read a history book. I have to read historical fiction. So I get the history, the kings, the queens, and everything else, the Romans, the Saxons, the Vikings, but I get a story with it. And I read every single day, sometimes in the mornings when I wake up, if I wake up early, or in the evenings. But yeah, I just love historical fiction.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, the storytelling part makes sense because you're definitely a storyteller. So I think folks will hear that in a few minutes. And the other question we start with, Gamiel, is a person that has influenced who you are today.
Oh, you see, this one's dead easy. Mrs. Hutchinson, class 8, when I was 8. And I was brought up in a highly deprived area of Birmingham. And Mrs. Hutchinson had an annex which was just off the school. So when you went to her class, you had to leave the school yard and walk over the road. And she wouldn't allow students to go into her class unless they had polished shoes. Some people didn't have full shoes. They had holes in their shoes.
Right.
Had to have polished shoes and a comb. Those were her two, very, very strict. But as soon as you got into her class, it was like magic. Everything was photographs, images, plants, insects. Just opened me up to, you could say, the outside world. And I've never forgotten it. The number of things I've done since because of Mrs. Hutchinson. And I'll talk you through some of them as we go along.
Fantastic. Well, a shout out to teachers, because
Absolutely.
we all are where we are, and sometimes, not in the places we want to be. So good teachers, it's the hardest job. It was the hardest job I've ever had. And to be able to praise one is big praise. And I don't know if she's still on the planet, but she should be able to hear it.
Sadly not, a long time ago. And there's another story there, but I will share that privately.
Fantastic. So, Gamiel, I want to just open you to talk about your background a bit. If you talk about intersections, as we often do in this space, Yemeni, Scottish, Irish, Indian, Muslim, Christian, Birmingham. When you look back and share your story more robustly, which of those threads or which combination feels most foundational to you now?
Well, I grew up in a time where there were less rules. There were still huge amounts of discrimination. Migration's always been a problem. And even back then, it was a huge problem. However, as a child, I was adventurous. I was hyperactive. I loved sports. We were jumping out of first floor windows onto mattresses. And those things were allowed. And I was building bikes at the age of 7, 8, 9. And these were bits of bikes lying around. You could do stuff without people saying you can't do that. I would get injured. I'd be bruised, battered every single day. But that didn't matter because that was part of the course. That was part of the adventure. And, I actually say the biggest gift I've ever been given is my heritage. Being in Scotland and my mum being Christian, having to pretend to be Christian, although in Birmingham, my dad being Muslim, I had to be a Muslim. So I was constantly cloaking. I was constantly navigating my way. And in terms of how it's impacted on me as a human being, I've taken the good. I genuinely believe I've taken the good from each of those elements that make up who I am. And even, Christianity, and again, probably at the age of 11, in fact, this was perfect timing. At the age of 11, before going to Yemen, I remember being in my first religious education class and not really doing much around religion prior to that. But the teacher actually quoted St. Luke chapter 10, verse 27. Love thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, with all thy mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And that stuck with me since the age of 11. And I use that because there's comparables with Islam, Judaism, and many other religions. Yeah. So you could say that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken. I know that's come from Christianity, but again, over the years, I've managed to explore other religions and bring out something similar. So even though I call myself Muslim, and and part of that was, going to Yemen, which we'll talk about later, I still feel that I've managed to take the best of what's been offered to me.
Fantastic. So you just mentioned Yemen. I've heard you tell that story before I met you, and then when I talked to you, and we in preparation a couple of times we've been able to talk. You said that your trip was supposed to be a little less than 2 months, and it turned into a little more than 2 years. And some people might say, "Oh, that happened to you. Oh, I'm so sorry. What's going on? I can't believe that." But you describe it as an experience that shaped you. So, what did Yemen give you that added to or that contrasted with what England did?
Well, I mean, I've been thinking about this question, and a number of things. One, community. And again, living in a village, or when I first went over. So this was supposed to be, my dad told my mom that I'd be gone for 6 months. 6 weeks. And my mom went, fine. Well, I got to Yemen, got into this village where there was no gas, no water, no electricity, totally different way of life. And this goes back to 1973. So this wasn't yesterday. This was quite a long time ago. Living in that village where everybody lived off the land. You cooked your food on wood, on stoves. There wasn't coal, or there was paraffin heaters or burners. That your animals literally lived. As most of the houses were 2 floor and a roof. The animals, the cows, the sheep, the chickens, the snakes, you name it, they were all at the ground floor. And everything was on the second floor. The bed, I mean, there was only 2 bedrooms. A kitchen was literally a tiny room. To wash, you would have to go downstairs and then take a jug of water to get washed. It was just a totally, totally different life. But you felt part of a community. Everybody supported everybody else. And if somebody's crops died for some reason, everybody would share their crops. When there was a celebration, you could walk into any house in that village and they would water you, they would feed you, and they would make sure that you were okay. And again, being mixed heritage and going to Yemen, the experience was a bit of a mix. I got into fights, but most of the time I avoided fights. And my dad, I can remember my dad saying to me, "How come you've got that bruise on your cheek?" And I'd go, "Well, so-and-so hit me." And he did go, why don't you hit them back? I thought, wow, I've got permission. Permission, phenomenal. So what happened the next time I got punched? I punched somebody back. And then what happened was that person would go find my dad, tell my dad would come running out and grab me by the ears. I'd probably get a smack. And I'm just so confused. I said to my dad when I got back into the house, I said, "But you told me to hit them." He said, "Yes, but not in front of anybody else."
Wow.
That was the rule. It's incredible. And again, how people are seen is so important.
It's community. It's like it's almost like a accountability system.
Yeah. Well, it was incredible. So that 6 weeks ended up being, after 6 months, my dad came back to the UK. So, oh my God, freedom. In fact, that's something I wrote down. Freedom to be me. My dad left me at the age of 12 and came back to the UK. So didn't see my mum for 2.5 years, didn't see my dad for 2 years. But my dad, before he came back, he took me up to the city of Taz, where I was supposed to go to school. In fact, I'm probably oversharing here, but I've got a feeling that it's a bit of fun. My dad left me with what was called he called him his solicitor. This chap was a black marketeer, sold guns, sold cart, exchanged money. I can remember carrying a sack of money from his house to the bank. Nobody would come anywhere near me. In Yemen, the rules were you steal, you get hand chopped off. So nobody came anywhere near me. But I went to school for 6 months of that, 2 years in the city. The rest of it was an adventure.
Sure.
And honestly, even to today, my first job I got when I was about 13. And that was when the villagers came up to the city. I would collect them from the Land Rovers and Range Rovers that they came up with. And I'd know where every chemist, every doctor, everywhere that I could barter. And I'd take them around wherever they wanted. They'd end up buying me lunch. And bear in mind that the chap that my dad had us stay with didn't feed us. We were given 10 reals a day. And that 10 reals was probably equivalent to 50 pence in England. But I literally had to buy my breakfast, dinner and tea. So when the visitors came up, I'd get my lunch paid for. 2, they'd give me a tip when I took them back to the Land Rovers to go back home once they'd collected all their clothing and perfumes. So that was my first job. So you can imagine, I had 2 years of total freedom at the age of, I would say, between 13 and 14. And that made me who I,
It was kind of like you actually probably developed your entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh,
to a bit.
absolutely.
Yeah. Because I mean, you were basically finding business, closing business, keeping long-term customers. You were doing all the things that you did.
Yes. And being inclusive along the way. And again, Mrs. Hutchinson and my RE teacher, love thy neighbor as thyself, just recognizing that every single person is important.
Yeah.
Just as important as anybody else. So I grew up with that just before I went to Yemen. So it's perfect timing.
You came back after these 2.5 years, not being able to see your mom. You weren't speaking English while you were in Yemen.
I was learning Arabic.
Yeah, so you had to take you had to take English as a second language classes, I imagine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've still got the certificates.
Yeah, and then like over time, you got back in it and you walked into an insurance company. You didn't know anything about insurance, and you got a job. What did the interviewer, what did the owner of that organization, of that agency, see in you? What did he get from you?
And again, this takes me back a long time. Those were the days where there were endless jobs. Everybody was looking for people, and I could walk into a job center, take a card with a company name, the person I'm supposed to be interviewing, the time of the interview, and just go for an interview. That's how it was. But again, we're talking about 1979, so we're going back quite a long time. I'd failed all of my exams. Yeah, it wasn't that I wasn't clever. It was just 2.5 years of not studying. Put a tiny dent in my ability. But when I got interviewed and sat in this massive room, I can remember going in the lift for the first time, going up to the top floor of this massive massive insurance company called the Wesleyan and General. And I got into Mr. Woodgate's office and I looked around and it was like the size of my house. One it had in there was a cupboard and a big table. But behind Mr. Woodgate was a photograph of the company football team. And me and Mr. Woodgate, we talked about football for an hour. Honestly, if there were 10 people being interviewed that day for that role, I would be, in terms of experience, in terms of knowledge, skill, ability, I would have been 10th. I would have been right down at the bottom. But in terms of enthusiasm, in terms of passion, in terms of getting on with people, that's what Mr. Woodgate saw. I didn't think I'd got the job.
No, it's so interesting, Gamiel. Both interested and have been steeped in what we know as cultural intelligence for a long time. You've had an education of that, and it's allowed you to kind of go in and out of places so comfortably that, can you teach that? Because that's such a, because you don't feel uncomfortable wherever you go. You know what I mean? You walk
Yes.
in and you can be comfortable. That's rare.
Yeah. Do you know you can teach it? And to me, how you teach it is getting others to take responsibility for their growth, for their development. I've taught myself, I teach myself every single day. I say I teach myself, I learn from others every single day.
Right.
And every day is a learning day. And I genuinely believe that. And we run programs where those programs are focused on getting people to take responsibility of their careers, take responsibility of their growth. And when they do that, they learn so much more about themselves. I was just in a situation where I learned so much about myself in those 2.5 years. That was almost 20-year education in those 2.5 years.
Wow. At such a young age, I mean, you think back, I don't think the upbringing that I had, if I had been dropped in there, I would have wilted. And your dad trusted the community to do that. And it brought so much to your life. It's so amazing. So Gamiel, you've been at this so-called diversity and inclusion space for many years, 25 plus years. When you think about it and like really honest with yourself and really honest with people that have been working in the field, what has the field actually moved? And in a way, what has it only appeared to move?
We've done a lot of work in terms of raising awareness, and also things like every year there's something different. We're becoming more aware of the fact that we've got biases, blind spots, and we don't know what we don't know. Without that training, that development, that would never have happened. We would still be guessing or making assumptions. Also things like neurodiversity, particularly over the last 7-8 years, the awareness, and this to me links into the term woke. And I love the term woke. I just think everybody's misunderstanding what we mean by woke. To me, what woke means is an awakening to something, an awakening to menopause, an awakening to our kids being 11 and going to secondary school, an awakening to, let's just say, autism, dyspraxia, ADHD, dyslexia, an awakening to the different challenges that people experience in life. And that's not specific to one group. Everybody has an awakening at some stage about something in their lives. Sadly, politics has really scuppered the term woke. But for me, it just means an awakening. In terms of, I'd say, where the things that have moved, you could say the awareness has improved. However, the embedding is still way off. We have not, I say, we do audits. So we've been doing audits for 8 years. And so many of the organizations, with a few exceptions, will think that, if you think about a maturity matrix, they will think that they're at level 4, which is progressive. Well, and progressive to me means that you're not just embedding, you're seeing the impact of the work that you're doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
But when we actually audit them, they're actually coming at level 2 to level 3. So awareness moving into embedding. So they still haven't embedded diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And when you think about, if I was to explain what embeddedness looks like to somebody in an organization that's at that, what you call level 4.
Yeah.
What would people be doing differently?
Okay. So what they would be doing is at level 2 or 3, they would be looking at, let's say, recruitment, retention, development, progression, and they would be looking at where data. Data is key to everything. So where are they now in terms of recruitment of all the different diversity strands, where they want to be, how they're going to get there. Level 4 is what's been the result of those 2-3 years. So how have you moved? Where's the dial now compared to where it was when you were at level 2? So the embedding is actually seeing real impact. You're seeing shifts in recruitment, retention, progression, development. You're seeing shifts in customer satisfaction. You're seeing shifts in how you are perceived by the market, and that might be different scores on different sites, etc. So it's not just about numbers, but those numbers, those shifts, but also it's about how you make people feel in your organization. And this isn't just about staff surveys or pulse surveys. It's about deep listening and really understanding what each and every individual's challenge is, because everybody has challenges in the workplace. I'll talk more about reasonable adjustments later, but how are we supporting people to get the best out of them? So level 4 is you're seeing genuine impact.
Sure. And you could actually, in some ways, quantify it, but definitely you can qualify it with stories of what's changed for people and their ability to make their best contributions.
Yep.
I was talking to somebody, I guess it was probably, I don't know, about 2-3 weeks ago now. And they were talking about being in this field for 20 plus years. Yes. And they have taken on a bigger role, geographical scope, because they're multinational. And when they to talk about inclusion, the first thing these were senior HR people from around the globe. The first thing they talked about was how many women they had, how many underrepresented groups they have. Now, we've been at this a while. Roosevelt Thomas wrote a book called Beyond Race and Gender in 1991. Yeah. And that's where they still remain. And that's where it seems like a lot of people remain, which was reasonably like, whoa, what have we been doing? Why is it that you think that's maintained? Why we still have that dominant frame of, as Howard Ross used to say, like elemental P in the alphabet, women and minorities?
Yeah, I can't identify one reason. There isn't one reason. There are multiple reasons for this. For me, the biggest is organizations haven't created the foundations for diversity, equity, and inclusion to thrive in their organization. They don't know where they're. In fact, I challenge anybody. You talk to 5 organizations and you ask them, where are they in terms of diversity and inclusion? They will make assumptions because they won't know. Well, maybe one might know out of the 5, if we're lucky. But most people have never monitored, measured, and managed all of those different areas. They don't know where they're at. And if you don't know where you're at, you're not going to have any foundations to build on.
Right.
Really, that's been the key challenge for organizations, is not having those solid foundations, not having roots that have stabilized them, even when the foundations are a bit shaky. If you've got good solid roots and then you're focused on, if you're focused on being human, and that really is key, is that understanding that diversity, equity, and inclusion is about everyone. And there's so much that every organization can do. The other challenge is organizations really haven't got the business case. They really don't understand the impact on performance, productivity, performance, and profit. Everything that we do around diversity, equity, and inclusion will have an impact on performance, productivity, and profit. Everything that we do.
That's a sell, in the climate that we're in now, to sell it like that. I think it's almost like, I know you've been selling it like that for a long time, but the past 6 years after the death of George Floyd, I think we're on that anniversary, or we just passed it. And that wasn't the frame. The frame almost seemed, for some, I can imagine, it seemed like a gotcha game for those that weren't supportive of it. And it wasn't just so-called white people. And it was, even if I challenged that notion, I would even get a little bit of heat. Not light, not trying to help me see clear, but heat, right? It's that kind of 3 Ps, if I may, we're having this backlash in the country I know best, and it's traveling, but it hasn't necessarily landed in Europe yet the same way. Do you think it's because the work has been done differently in Europe, or because we just haven't reached the political conditions for that mindset that crept in leading up post George Floyd, and particularly leading up to the years before Trump got reelected? What is it that is Europe just ahead, or is Europe just waiting for the ball to drop? Like, what if we're talking about this 3D?
Yeah.
Are we getting to the place where we're a little more durable if those attacks come?
Yeah. I think one of the sad things that we need to recognize is it feels like a bomb's been dropped on the US in terms of the impact, in terms of the different states having different legislation and the sacking within a day. We don't have the same, you could say, legislation that you have. We have more robust. You can't just sack somebody and say, sorry, you've lost your job. You've got to have good reasons for all of this. And we have the Equality Act, which visibly is a great thing, but still doesn't have the teeth that it needs to have. And in 2005, prior to 2005, we used to have the Commission for Racial Equality, and they had teeth, and they used to have enforcement officers that would walk into local government offices, the civil service, and say, right, we've had 4 complaints about this. What are you doing about it? You've got a month to get it right. We desperately need that enforcement. As I say, prior to 2005, we used to have a Disability Rights Commission. We had a women's organization. We had the Commission for Racial Equality. And then in 2005, they combined all of them together to form the Commission for Equality and Human Rights. And what that did was it just mixed everything together and lost focus. So we've had, prior to George Floyd, I would say 2005, we experienced quite a few challenges. And I can remember at the time, organizations, this is where organizations were going, we treat everybody the same, thinking you really haven't got it. And then we started talking about equity to understand why we can't treat everybody the same. So we've had lots of different shifts. And organizations, I would love to say that we have lots of fantastic organizations, which, don't get me wrong, we do. But what I find is that a lot of those organizations are inclusive of the representation that they have. And what I mean by that is the vast majority will be of the same nationality. And again, whether that's in the UK, whether it's across Europe, you'll have the same nationality. And an organization will think it's doing really well because everybody's enjoying themselves. They love work, but they don't have the diversity. And yes, they're inclusive. Say you have these echo chambers, you have all of the different challenges, but everybody's enjoying what they're doing. And they may even be profitable. But what they're forgetting is they could be even more profitable.
Yeah. So, like, even if we stripped away the identities that we focus on the most and we just cast the net wider, we probably get them, because people go to people they know and that they went to Oxbridge with or whatever. I think you leave money on the table because you're not bringing in perspectives that are dramatically different. You could have homogeneously ethnic homogeneity and ethnicity and potentially get diversity of cognition, but the likelihood is relatively low, particularly if they're all coming from similar postal codes or similar schools,
universities,
similar training. Mm-hmm. Gamiel, we obviously know what's going on in the U.S. and we see what's happening right now with the Reform Party. And you said when we talked before that you had some concern about what happens if the far right takes over or gains more power. What does it mean if the rise of reform continues on the trajectory it's on? And what does that mean, you think, to practically for organizations trying to do work in EDI and, of course, for people like us that advise them?
No, really interesting. And I've got a comparison to reform. And being the age that I am, I can remember the Rivers of Blood speech by Enoch Powell. That was in the late 60s, which were anti, and this is when we wanted to bring in the Race Equality Act, which allowed individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds to buy houses, to get education, to get into work. And he was anti all of that. We've experienced this before. This isn't a new thing. And the far right have been around they've been around forever. Whether they're named Ku Klux Klan or the National Front, we've had them around. We just haven't had them in government. And we haven't got them in government yet. They've got certain positions, but we've got a lot of work to do to fight against. And I remember back, let's say, in the early days where we have, and this is the thing, we have some brilliant people in society. And what we need to do is get those people together and start challenging more effectively. The sad thing at the moment, and I notice it more than most, is that there's lots of loud voices. The Trump voice is the loudest. However, we've got lots of loud voices that are sending messages, anti-woke messages or woke messages, but we need to shout louder. My prediction for the future in terms of this is I've always seen the work that we do around diversity and inclusion as being evolutionary. We evolve. However, we are going to see revolutions.
Sure. When you think about, so I grew up in the middle of the United States in Kansas.
Yeah.
Everybody in my family was a Republican. So I didn't have this distinction that Republicans then and Republicans now aren't the same thing. And I don't believe the majority of Republicans, there's a small faction, people that consider themselves Republicans, they're not the Republicans of Lincoln, right? And I imagine there's people in reform that aren't straight up bigots. And people that support reform because they've gotten a narrative that's obviously been social media oriented and heavily, you can't deny that Trump has had an influence on the world. How do you go from just a resistance to what we know as reform to a understanding of interdependence, that we're not, in your case, two United Kingdoms? I mean, we could go back in some history and people might say different, but right now you're one UK. How do you break through beyond kind of a contentious lens?
A lovely question. And you see, when I think of reform, I think of a political party that is built not based on hatred, not based on anti-anybody, but that really haven't got an understanding, particularly around the area of our work. The whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is about recognizing every single individual. I think part of our challenge has been over the years is that we have just focused on strand after strand rather than focusing on the individual. In terms of everybody counts, everybody's involved. We've talked too much about everything, about race, about disability. And I know some people will challenge me on this, but we've talked too much about other strands of diversity. We haven't talked about the impact on the white male or the non-employed white female. We haven't talked about everybody else, but every single individual can and will benefit if we create an environment, let's say a social or a work environment, where everybody is able to be the best that they can be. And this is reducing or eliminating exclusion, harassment, bullying, giving people the opportunity to use the knowledge, the skill, the ability that they've created over their many years in employment, rather than coming up with an idea and the manager going, sorry, yeah, we're doing it this way.
Yeah.
Or leaders in organizations are blockers to so much that goes on.
Yeah.
And we need to think about how we unblock those leaders. And those leaders are also in the Reform Party.
Sure.
And we need to change their minds. We actually need to focus on how do we change the minds of Reform members? How can we increase their knowledge so that they see what the leadership of the Reform Party are actually doing? Because at the moment, I almost feel that they have blinkers on, and we need to help remove those blinkers.
Yeah. And for some, I think it's intentional blinkers because it's politically expedient. For others, they really think that it's right because of everything they've heard. They've kind of gotten into this spiral of anything that speaks of the so-called left is automatically overwoke, you know, because they're overwoke. So yeah, I think that's a tough kind of hill to walk up, you know, slippery.
But it's possible. And again, anything is possible. I mean, I've grown up knowing that I can improve on absolutely everything that I do in life. But it's nothing that I do that I can't improve on.
Right.
And that's my philosophy. But I also know that there are millions and millions of people who are similar to me. We need to collaborate. We need to come together. We need a movement. The thing is, we have so many people in this space who are suffering. They're suffering. Loads of my peers, other consultancies, they're suffering badly because of the situation at the moment. But we need to rise up. We almost need a big campaign of our own.
It needs to be clearer.
Yeah.
That brings me to another question. There's been practitioners doing this for a while, but we talked about before, and I've experienced it. I don't know how much you have. You talked about collaboration between consultancies. That is one way to weather the storm that we're in right now. And the field has been pretty competitive. Sometimes insular people don't necessarily connect. They might love a particular influencer that they'll follow or what have you and parrot them. But in terms of collaboration amongst one another, and I've had some good ones, so this has got me saying it doesn't happen. But what does genuine collaboration look like for people in the inclusion, diversity, equity space? And what stopped it?
Okay. So, I mean, this is really interesting because real collaboration to me means knowing what I'm good at, firstly, knowing what it is within my consultancy that I do better than anybody else, but also recognizing, and again, we partner with so many different organizations, very, very privileged, but it's recognizing in my organization, where am I lacking? What am I not very good at? And not trying to build that thing that I'm not very good at, but bringing in the expertise of those fantastic people who do it brilliantly. So bringing in the knowledge that I don't have, and again, sharing the knowledge that I do have. And again, we collaborate with organizations in India where we've got the cultural knowledge to work with the European audience. So yeah, it's understanding what you're good at and then working with organizations that can fill the gaps that you have. And it's not about going to clients and saying, right, we can do 100 different things for you. It's a case of, this is what we're going to clients and literally being honest and saying, this is what we're good at. We work in partnership with X that's good at Y. We work with so-and-so. But I mean, some of my associates are phenomenal individuals that are heads of diversity for global brands for 3 days, and they may do a day a week for me. So it's bringing in, it's having the right people doing the right work, not just sort of picking up everything that
I can be
comes
the
your
jack of all
way.
trades. It's rare. It's rare.
Yeah.
Let's say you're talking to a practitioner right now,
Yeah.
maybe even an American that doesn't live in Switzerland. They're discouraged watching cuts, watching titles changed or disappeared, work pretty much wrecked, dismantled.
Yeah.
What do you tell them in the period time we're in right now?
Very, very difficult question. And again, I would have told them something different 6 months ago to what I'm about to tell them now. And probably I would, then again, we get approached by lots of individuals, particularly those that are self-employed, that have been doing this for many years. The work just has stopped. My advice to them is, one, become an associate for other organizations, although that's still a challenge in itself. Two, join an organization, and there are many organizations that are still doing this work, and there are adverts every single day with new roles for still saying diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are new roles every day. So the other advice is go and find yourself a job in a corporate organization, and if you can do 3 days there and run your own consultancy for the other 2 days, that keeps, it keeps your organization going, because if you've been inactive for 6 months, then you'll disappear.
Yeah.
You've got to continue to have a presence. And the other thing I was advising them to do is think about where their expertise lies. Start, everybody puts stuff on LinkedIn, but create a really good campaign around what you're good at and start talking about it. Talk about it in depth. Become an expert in that area and not a DEI sort of.
Journalists.
Yeah, I'm a DEI generalist, but I have sort of strategists, I have researchers, facilitators, trainers, but focus on one thing that you are really good at. And the final thing is work locally. You can do so much in your own local community, but make sure that 20% of what you do is voluntary, because you get seen. You need to be seen. That's something we've done for decades. I get seen within our voluntary sector because I do a lot of voluntary work, but 20% of all of our training, even audits we will do, huge cost audits we will do for free for some charities.
Sure.
And just upon who they are. But the trustees of those charities are directors of other organizations. And it's incredible how much work I've gotten because of the charitable work that I do.
That's helpful. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, Gamiel, I want to just move towards closing. I have so many questions and so little time. What didn't I ask you that I should have, that's been on your mind, that you think is quite important right now, that you would like to share with the audience of stuff that I didn't bring up?
The question I think you should have asked was, what would have the biggest impact now? And the thing is, the majority of the work that we do is behavioral change. And I genuinely believe that 85% of the change that needs to happen in every single organization is human behavior. And again, as simple as a simple act of kindness, right up to allyship, sponsorship, recognizing that somebody is really good at presentations, but they really haven't had a good platform, giving them that platform, or taking them to an event, or getting them to design your slides for you at a conference and referencing them to say, these slides are phenomenal. Yeah, but I didn't do them myself. They were done by X. Just that call out, those simple, the work that we do is simple. I genuinely believe it's simple. People complicate it. So leadership, and that the biggest changes will come through leadership behavior.
Folks, Gamiel Yafai, Gamiel, thank you for the time. Thank you for the thoughtfulness. Thank you for your just deep, soulful kindness. I really, really appreciate it.
Can I just say, you didn't tell me that I needed to bring tissues.
It's when you have a genuine kind of respect for somebody, I figure we should always have a few in our pocket because I think that's the space that actually has been the most impactful for me in this work, both with clients and with practitioners, is when you can sense somebody's compassion. And we need more of that. And is it technical? No, but in the world we're in now, it's probably the most powerful source of transformation and probably the most powerful thing that businesses need. And you just walk around with it. And I appreciate it.
I genuinely thank you for for your friendship. And I feel like we've been friends over many, many years. And it's just, there's a time and place for everything in life.
Absolutely.
But I also believe that we are all on a journey. We just have choices.
Absolutely.
And it's about the choices that we make. So thank you for the privilege of joining you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Folks, Reconstructing Inclusion Podcast will have all the notes for how you can reach Gamiel and his website that's been revamped with some really cool colors, by the way, and everything else that we talked about will have references to it. We hope this was helpful. Make it a great day. Peace.
Hey, thank you.
If you are committed or simply a little bit curious about how to make DEI accessible to everyone, actionable, that is, unambiguously prioritized and sustainable, aligned with personal and organizational purpose, hit the subscribe button. Make it a great day. Peace.